you digest lunch and talk about my time as an artist in the arts industry here. So it took me 3 days to sit down and figure out how to write this speech. I would stare at the blank Word document with the flashing cursor, waiting for me to start typing, and I'd end up doing something else. It's something all artists, well, writers, can relate to. But someone made a statement, though, when I told them I was going to be making this speech that made me sit down and start typing. And that statement was this: your words inspire our youth. You tell them the truth and you show them a different world. No one has ever said anything like this to me before. And though I don't necessarily believe it to be true, it makes me think about all the things I've done before and since moving to Mongolia. Because the only way you can show anyone a different world is by experience, right? Now, I don't know if 26 can be considered young, but I do know I've spent 24 years of my life being undiscovered. And I mean undiscovered as an artist, a photographer, a screenwriter, a journalist, and a poet. And quite frankly, the talented and hilarious individual that I believe myself to be. But I have always wanted to be a writer, and I've always believed in the arts, but eventually I resigned myself to being that crazy writer that locks himself in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and the only way that they are discovered is by a hiker who discovers their body after they've been eaten by raccoons. The creative industry is the only industry where you have to work for free to build a portfolio. It doesn't work that way in any other job. You can't imagine a highly trained surgeon operating on people for free in the vain hope that he'll be taken in by a well-paid hospital. It just doesn't happen. With this in mind, I spent years before, during, and after university working in jobs that I hated, like supermarkets and restaurants, so I could experiment with the arts for free. I would volunteer at newspapers and magazines and theatres, and I would get lost in the world of literature and poetry. They were difficult years, and it was the words of other writers that kept me going when I felt like I was never going to be what I wanted to be. But then I saw a film called Land, and the opening line is this: it's about a society on its way down, and as it falls, it keeps telling itself, so far so good, so far so good, so far so good. But how you fall doesn't matter. It's how you land. Though the film centers mainly about the idea of the degeneration of society, it also focuses on identity, about truly knowing yourself, about giving yourself in to being whatever it is that you want to be, and taking every opportunity that you're given. A screenshot of the billboard saying, "The world is ours," has become an iconic element of the film. And it was this, along with the previous statement I just made, that made me think that I was really going to have to give myself over into the arts if I ever wanted the future I had dreamed of. So that's what I did. I took the fall, and I thought about the landing. I quit the job I hated. I went to China. I went to India. I came back with no money, no job, but a whole new perception on life. And that's a cliche, but it's true. I wasn't going to do the things I hated anymore. I wrote for travel magazines. I wrote for different newspapers. I started up a blog. And then I helped renovate an old 1930s Art Deco cinema. That cinema gave me a job when it opened. Then I was given the opportunity to write the film program and the synopsises. Then to work in the projection. I learned about all elements of film that I never learned at university. That job showed me that things come to you when you're happy and you've dedicated yourself to something. It took me 23 years to get to that point in my life. So it was only because I decided to push myself that I ended up teaching drama and acting in Mongolia. I've always been a part of theatre, but I figured it would be a real challenge to go somewhere where we don't have the same acting style as we do in the West. I was right about that. My first year was incredibly difficult. And somehow I managed to put on a production of Bugsy Malone with a cast of 20 Mongolian students, all ranging from ages 12 to 15. They had never been on stage before. They didn't know stage right and stage left. They didn't know what props were or costume changes. But they learned a whole script in English, and they performed it with all of their hearts. I think it was one of the hardest things all of us have ever done. It was also whilst in Mongolia that I really pushed my writing, some of which is in journalism, but mainly in poetry. And I always had these preconceived ideas about poetry, that it was a dying art form, and even if I wrote it, no one would read it anyway. But then I had this whole new perception on life, right? So I decided I was going to write a poetry blog, and I was going to put it out there. That poetry got featured on some websites, and then I won a competition. I ended up in an anthology back in England. And it was that showed me that I was capable of doing the things that I loved, and I was capable of showing the younger generation what they too were capable of doing. This isn't a life story, but when I go on to tell you the things that I wish to talk about, I want you to know that I've experienced it too. That I've sat and thought about giving up, that I've done the horrible 9-to-5 jobs, and I've doubted that anyone would discover me ever. Because that's what I really want to talk to you about. Our idea of being discovered, our perception of it, and what that even really means. Because if you're an artist or you work in the creative industry, you probably know what it feels like to be undiscovered. You probably also suffer from a fear of being unoriginal. You think to yourself, it's pointless to finish a song or write the end of a chapter or write a poem because by the time you have, someone will have done it better than you. Every writer and artist talks about this fear. And here's a clip from a film called Howl with James Franco acting as Allen Ginsberg during the Beat Generation. Writing from within you cannot be unoriginal. You are unique, and the younger you are, the less likely you will have been to be manipulated by the world and other people's opinions. Potentially starting now. We'll move on. So, you are your own person. You have your own voice. Follow it, and know that all art is relative. Be unique. Because artistic talent is personal both to you and the person you're connected to. And that connection that your art made to whatever person, whatever the medium, is being discovered. It's up to you to take that and be content with it. Those are the things you need to hold on to when you feel like you're never going to be paid for doing something that you love. Think about the Beatles, one of the most famous bands of all time. Everybody knows who they are, but until you've listened to an album and found a song that you've connected to, then you haven't really discovered them. Discovery, especially in art, is a personal experience. I have a collection of over 50 poems. The amount of recognition I've received is quite low, but I kept going. And eventually I won a competition and was featured in a women's poetry anthology back in England. Obviously that was a good feeling, but it was nothing in comparison to getting this piece of feedback on one of my poems. One tear for you. Your poem made me cry. You write beautifully. You make my heart feel and my head think. You paint pictures with my words I could never do with 1,000 colors. You have touched a deep place in my heart. That's true discovery. That meant more to me than being published. And if you persevere with whatever it is that you love to do, someone will discover you. It's up to you to be content with that. And I don't mean settle for strangers' compliments on the internet, but I mean take those small things and let them spur you on to the big things. Charles Bukowski, one of my favorite poets, said, "Find what you love and let it kill you." And that is the very essence of what I'm talking about. You have to be completely consumed by your passion. You have to give yourself in completely to what it is that you want to do. And then it's only then that you're even ready to be discovered. You're serious and you're dedicated and the world starts to notice. Charles Bukowski also has a poem that is similar to what I'm talking about, and hopefully I'm going to play it now.
So, You Want to Be a Writer by Charles Bukowski. If it doesn't come bursting out of you, in spite of everything, don't do it. Unless it comes unasked out of your heart and your mind and your mouth and your gut, don't do it. If you have to sit up for hours staring at your computer screen or hunched over your typewriter, searching for words, don't do it. If you're doing it for money or fame, don't do it. If you're doing it because you want women in your bed, don't do it. If you have to sit there and rewrite it again and again, don't do it. If it's hard work just thinking about doing it, don't do it. If you're trying to write like somebody else, forget about it. If you have to wait for it to roar out of you, then wait, patiently. If it never does roar out of you, do something else. If you first have to read it to your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your parents or to anybody at all, you're not ready. Don't be like so many writers. Don't be like so many thousands of people who call themselves writers. Don't be dull and boring and pretentious. Don't be consumed with self-love. The libraries of the world have yawned themselves asleep over your kind. Don't add to that. Don't do it. Unless it comes out of your soul like a rocket. Unless being still would drive you to madness or suicide or murder. Don't do it. Unless the sun inside you is burning your gut. Don't do it. When it is truly time, if you have been chosen, it will do it by itself. And then it will keep on doing it until you die, or it dies in you. There is no other way, and there never was.
Yeah, he deserves that. Do what you love, let it burst out of you, and don't let anyone stand in the way of it. Mongolia was the catalyst of this for me. I do everything that I love now, and I don't let anyone stand in the way of it. This year alone, I met the Poet Laureate of England, and I was given the opportunity to work with an excellent children's director with Mongolian students to put on a production at the State Opera and Ballet Theatre. These students that I'm talking about, they're in the same situation as the students that I put the first production on with, except they are doing a full-scale production at the most prestigious theatre in the country. They had to learn 20 songs, all in English. They had to learn choreographed dance moves, what set pieces to take on where, what props they needed, costume changes. It was theatre at a professional level. These students that I'm talking about, they are your future. And from the work ethic and creativity that I have seen, you should be proud to hear that. I have never seen such dedication from first-time actors and actresses. They never complained when we made them do something again, or they had to do a whole scene over because we missed the lighting cue. They studied at school in between, and they had all of their lessons, and they did 3 performances in a row without complaint. Now, once you've worked with a particular group of teenagers for a certain amount of time, they start to look at you in a different way. They see your work ethic, your passion, your strengths, and they start to wonder how it is that you got to where you are now. And if there's one thing I've learned from working with children in the arts, it's this. Honesty is the most important part of communication. Don't treat them like children. Treat them like growing adults, because that is what they are. And if there is one thing that you need to remember, is that you just need to sit and listen to them, listen to their questions and answer them as honestly as you can, because they will respect you for it. So I told them the same things I'm telling you now, that you need to be happy, that you need to work hard for something that you love. All of a sudden, I had children asking me about how to apply for international colleges, about additional acting classes, about what they would need to get into drama school or theatre. But then they would come to me privately and say that their parents didn't want them doing that sort of thing, that it wasn't beneficial to them, that they should take other subjects instead. So I listened, and I told them the same things I'm telling you now, and that they should do what makes them happy. And I know some people in the audience probably won't like that part, that it is disrespectful to tell a child to go against his parents' wishes. But I went against mine my whole life, and whether they liked it or not at the time, they are proud of who I am now. These students are talented. They are yet to be systematically numbed by a society who tells us it is foolish to follow our dreams. They can break the mold, and they can become what they want to be. That's true originality, that's true art, and that's the truest path to discovery. It is the young that have the ability to change the future, and they can do it by being content, not angry. If you want to be a writer, write every day. If you want to be a singer, sing every day. If you want to be a dancer, dance every day, but don't be afraid of the arts, and don't be afraid of who you want to be. Because somewhere down the line, someone will notice you. They'll see your passion, your talent, and your ability to change the world, and that's being discovered in the highest form possible. I'm going to leave you with a quote. Thank you. I'm going to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite Wes Anderson films, Rushmore. And it sums up everything that I've been trying to say so simply that you'll wonder how I managed to make a 15-minute speech out of it. And that quote is this: you just got to find something that you love to do and then do that thing for the rest of your life. Thank you.
I think
it's this one.